Heyo, welcome back to the Undrafted and Unqualified Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Anthony. I'm here with Vinny again. And Vinny, tell them what we got in store today.
Yeah, so today, last episode, if you guys missed it, we did some start bench cuts. And to kind of go deeper into some of the names that we talked about and also new names, we're going to do a values episode. So to quickly define what we came up with, what to define as a value for this kind of episode is for a quarterback inside the top 20, a receiver inside the top 36, a running back inside the top 36, and a tight end inside the top 15 that is going to finish above their ADP, that we think will finish above their ADP or rank position wise across draft boards currently. So it's important to mention that this is the current ADP we're going off of. Are going to change, but we each picked one person at each position inside that criteria. And so yeah, we're gonna go into some depth about why we picked that person. And then yeah, today is just values. So that's kind of what we're focusing on today.
Mhm. Yeah, so for example, if we had, the current QB 15 we think is going to finish higher, that could be our value pick for the QB position. So we did them all within like a certain boundary, so running back, wide receiver in the top 36 because we're also going to do in a couple weeks a sleepers episode where we're going to do players outside of this ranking criteria. And then we're going to do busts next week, which will be the same criteria that we have as this current week with the values. So we'll pick somebody who
Yeah.
we think is going to finish lower. But yeah, today we're going to do just the values. You'll get busts next week and sleepers the following week. And we have some more in store after that, which, you'll find out later on.
Yep.
But yeah, why don't we get right into it? Let's start with the quarterbacks. And Vinny, if you want to talk about your quarterback here, go for it.
Sure. Yeah. So the quarterback that I picked is a guy I've liked since he honestly got drafted. Like him a lot. I think he's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, and it kind of gotten to a point where he's a little underappreciated, a little underrated, for what he's been able to do. And that quarterback is Justin Herbert. Currently, he's being drafted as kind of the 12th, about around the 12th quarterback off the board in redraft leagues, and that makes for an ADP of, let me see, 94. So that's about eighth, ninth round, depending on what league you're playing in, 10 team or 12 team. And yeah, I mean, Justin Herbert's coming off a 12th overall finish at the quarterback position last year. Not to mention he had a very good end of season, finishing with 23, 25, and 28 points in weeks 16 through 18. So, I mean, this is a guy that we're talking about winning you fantasy championships in a lot of leagues. I know he took me to the finals in a lot of leagues. So the finish at the end of the season is very promising. Also, not to mention, this is a guy with a 5,000 yard season under his belt. He's very talented. The Chargers kind of get put under the definition of being a run heavy team, which is true. Jim Harbaugh likes to run the ball. Greg Roman, their offensive coordinator, very known for his run schemes and a run heavy offense. But I feel like in offenses like that, the quarterback is usually the cause of that they're kind of forced to be a run heavy team where they have a very talented running back that causes that. In this case, this guy can make any throw you want. He can hit you not 80 yards down the field over the top, play action, 5 yards on a slant route, whatever it is, he can make any throw in the book. Um, I think why we're starting to see him kind of be at the spot of ADP of where he finished last year is because a little bit of that playoff game he had, it was horrendous. He threw about 4 or 5 interceptions, I think. And I think in the fantasy community, people always like to say put these players into some sort of category based on any game they play. Luckily, fantasy or playoffs in the NFL don't count towards fantasy, so that game doesn't mean anything toward this fantasy value. Um, I love Lad McConkey. I know we both love Lad McConkey,
Mhm.
and this is year two with Lad McConkey, who's only getting bigger, stronger, better, and
Yeah.
they get to build that rapport together that they already have established as being an elite duo. They add Trey Harris, who knows with him, kind of a mid-round draft, that guy that they just drafted, but a talented receiver that could play alongside Lad McConkey. And I think the biggest piece that a lot of people might be split on me with is they add Amar and Hampton and Najee Harris, which with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, you could say, wow, they're just going to become more run heavy. They're going to run the ball even more. I kind of look at it in the opposite way where, yes, they're going to run the ball a lot, but that just makes the offense more fluent, better. They're going to get more first downs, more red zone opportunities. And I think Justin Herbert, that just like elevates his game as a whole to have just a functional offense. Obviously, I said before he has the key. He's capable of throwing for 5,000 yards in a season. He can kind of do whatever you need him to do. And I don't see Jim Harbaugh wasting that in year two. I think they really kind of try and unlock the Justin Herbert that we knew from his rookie season, where he was kind of throwing the ball all over the field. So I think the offense really gets unlocked. And not to mention last year, he was kind of reserved in the passing territory. He was not very aggressive. He only had 3 interceptions. Um, and he threw for 25 or 6 touchdowns, I believe. So he's very efficient. But I think we start to see even more touchdowns in that territory of like 30 plus because they start to open that up. I don't think they want to waste this talent that they have on their hands. The offense gets better, like I mentioned. And I think it was promising to see he had a career high in rushing yards and rushing attempts last year. Obviously, for fantasy players, we love to see that. These aren't crazy numbers. He only had 300 rushing yards, but still, anything counts in terms of like weekly points or even at the end of the season, that total starts to add up. So I really like Justin Herbert to finish above QB 12 this year, and I think he's going to be a pretty good value to get at the end of your draft of drafting quarterbacks of like, hey, he's the 12th quarterback off the board. At that point, most teams have a quarterback already. So
Mhm.
if you're getting him as the last quarterback taken for a starting position, I'm ecstatic. So yeah, said a lot about him, but yeah, I love Justin Herbert this year and at that spot he's in right now.
Yeah, I like Herbert too. I think the weapons are there. They brought back his buddy Mike Williams too, so
Yeah,
they have receivers there, and the Chargers love to post their videos about Quentin Johnston on the highlight
yep, yep,
reels. But they have some of a receiving room now. Like they have
yep,
something there, and even if there's the tight end's not the best, it's still it's something.
yep,
And so even if they're running the ball, the offense as a whole is going to be really good. So I like that. I like that you have Herbert here. I'm a big fan of Herbert as well. I'm going to
yep,
stick with another passing pocket passing QB here. Really doesn't run much, but also can. And he's going literally one spot. What is it, before or after? Right, one spot before Justin Herbert right now at 93. And they're considering him as the QB 13, which doesn't really make sense, but that's Dak Prescott, where he's going at around the eighth round, pick 9. So I did this based off 12 team leagues. So he's
yep,
going in the back end of the eighth round right now. So here's the thing about Dak. Dak hasn't finished lower than QB 14 when he's played a full season. So last year he got hurt. He got hurt. I think it was what 2021 maybe or no 2022 he got hurt. 2022 he
yep,
got
yep,
hurt as well. So he's been hurt, hasn't played full seasons, but when he's played his full season and he's been healthy, he hasn't finished lower than QB 14. And 2 years ago in 2023, he actually finished at QB3 overall. QB3 overall. And then just for his other finishes in those full seasons, he finished at QB8 in 2021, QB2 in 2019, QB10 in 2018, and QB7 in 2016 as a rookie. So he's finishing very highly across the board. And he's currently going at QB13, and he's finished higher every fully healthy season he's had, right? So people are saying, oh, the Cowboys, they're not going to be as good a team, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, we saw it with Joe Burrow last year with such a bad defense. The offense is going to have to work. And Joe
yep,
Burrow put up points. So the defense is actually on a decline here in Dallas. They allowed 456 points last year compared to 309 the year before. So that offense is going to have to produce. And then I'm only talking about Dak and oh, they're gonna have to pass. Well, you know who he's passing to. Not only is he passing to CeeDee Lamb, but now they have George Pickens there, and they have Jake Ferguson, he's a very competent pass catching tight end, right? So they have the receiving weapons there now, and it's not the best depth, but CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens is a hell of a duo.
Yep.
Then you have some receiving backs here across the board. All four on the depth chart can catch. There's Miles Sanders, there's Deuce Vaughn, who's small and a pass catching back. But the two I like the most, who could also finish with the starting job, is Javonte Williams, who's finished with over 50 receptions in three of his four career years so far. And then Jadon Blue from Texas, he had 42 receptions in college last year, which is pretty high for a
Yep.
college running back. So he has a lot of options out of the backfield as well. And I think this is not a very strong rushing game as a whole, right? I don't think Javonte Williams is a great running back. I don't think Miles Sanders is. I think their best option is Jaden Blue, but we'll see what he can do if he wins the job, right? So he still has to win that, but I think they're catching passes regardless. And with a weak running game, I think that means it's going to be a lot more opening up in the passing game. And bringing in Pickens tells me they want that to be the case. And they traded for Jonathan Mingo a lot. They traded a lot for Mingo last year. I don't think he's worth the fourth round pick he was traded for, but it just goes to show how much the team wants to put into this passing game. And I think right now at QB 13, Dak Prescott is a hell of a value, right? We just talked about it with Herbert, but if QB 12, QB 13, these two guys, you're getting them after most teams have drafted a quarterback. So you
Yep.
can wait on them. You could go high tight end if you want to, which is, I'm starting to like that kind of path.
Yeah. Yep.
So you go high tight end, you get a value in Dak Prescott here, and I think Dak is going to finish above QB 13 in a fully healthy season, right? He hasn't
Yep.
finished lower than QB 14 when playing a full season. So I
Yep.
think I think it says a lot about where he's being drafted and where he can finish. I know he finished the year with an injury last year, but I think there's a lot of room for growth here. I think he's looking healthy again and he's got all the weapons and the tools to be able to do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we talked about him a little bit on our start bench cut. I think he was a part of one of those trios that we had, and I think he was both of our starts right off the bat. And so we
Yeah.
got to talk about him a little bit there, but everything you just said about him, I totally agree with. I think just going off of what you're saying at the end there, that yeah, it shows that if you can't really get one of those elite Josh Allen, Lamars at the front, there's no sense in wasting a top round 1 through 5 pick on a quarterback when you can get these two studs, possibly like top 5 potential at the end of your draft. So yeah, I love Dak a lot, and I also love the fact that we like him so much, and then Schottenheimer of the Cowboys coach is talking like he's saying he's still developing. So I kind of like those. You see that report? I kind of
I,
like
I
those.
didn't.
He was like he's still developing into the scheme. So I kind of like those reports that will maybe turn some newbies away. Like, oh, I don't like the. I don't care. He can be developing anything. We know how Dak Prescott can play, like you've talked about in his past finishes. So, yeah, I like him a lot at that ADP right now.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know last week when we did talk about it in the start bench cut, he was around like QB 16, something around there. So he is starting to climb up the ADP and people are starting to take him more often. You must be listening to
Mhm.
our podcast.
I think so.
But
Yeah, we need to stop giving away these picks, man.
yeah, yeah. Hey, take them while you can at the values. If you have early drafts for whatever reason, go ahead and grab him late. I think him or Justin Herbert, make your pick, whichever guy you like more. They're going back to back right now. So I think those are two great values here. Let's get into the running backs here. If Vinny, you can start this one off as well.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just get right into the name. The running back value that I went with is Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers, obviously. But he's at an ADP of 56 in currently, and about that uh equals to about the 19th running back off the board at that point in the draft. When I kind of was going through the ADPs, it's got this one specifically got me very excited. That this guy is close to the 19th running back off the board. That means there's 18 guys that they think will finish above him. And or I mean, at least right now, the general consensus is that they will finish above him. Chuba Hubbard really dominated last year. I mean, showed his talent and ability in a big way with an RB15 overall finish. I'm in 13th overall in fantasy points per game at the RB position. And that also is with really only 15 games. The first two games were kind of a wash where he didn't really establish that role. And so, I mean, if he plays those two games in the role that he had towards the end of the season and really the middle part of the season, we're looking at close, maybe potentially a top 10 finish at the running back position for someone that kind of been tossed around, kind of not really given a full shot at a job. And when he got it, he took it and ran with it. He was the Panthers depth chart as a whole. Isn't great, and they really did commit to him within that long-term extension last year at the midpoint of the season. The other pieces there are Rico Dowdle, who they signed, and Trevor Etienne, who they drafted um, recently. And so Jonathan Brooks was another big name that people thought he would be competition with, but Brooks out for the whole season again, unfortunately. So that depth chart is kind of all his at the top, and he's a three down back, not to mention. He's a capable pass catcher. I don't have in front of me how many passes he caught, but I know he was a kind of killer in PPR of kind of getting a lot of receptions and receiving yards and working kind of every part of the field and part of the offense that he was out there all the time. Um, the team itself of the Panthers are clearly committed to like building a successful offense. They're very offensive heavy in their past three drafts. Obviously, this year they went with Tedoroy and McMillan in the top 10. Last year they went Xavier Legette. So they're really kind of trying to fill out that receiver room for Bryce Young and obviously Dave Canales, who offensive mind, worked with Baker to kind of revive his career. And we saw last year at the end of last year that Bryce Young started to turn it around. So in a young kind of up and coming offense, that piece that I'm always kind of looking for is the running back position of like who is the guy that's going to come up with this whole team and offense and kind of try and enter the league as one of those elite offensives, top 10 that produce these fantasy studs. And Chuba Hubbard is the guy in Carolina, and he kind of did this all himself. He wasn't he wasn't gifted the position. He had to work for it, and he's given them no reason to give it to anyone else, especially Rico Dowdle, if that's your only competition. So, um, you know, I find it that if he can be your RB2 and you can get him around the fourth, fifth round in a 12-team league, that's a steal in my mind. And I think he finishes well above RB19. And I could see, if all things go right, a healthy season, and they use him the way I think they will, I could see a potential top 10 finish at the position. Granted, it's still the Carolina Panthers, and we don't know really what their offense will entail. But I believe in Dave Canales. He's shown in the past that he knows how to run an offense and an efficient and productive one for fantasy football as well. And so Chuba Hubbard really excites me as someone who can take even a step further than last year, which is kind of hard to imagine for some people, maybe. But I believe in their offensive line as well. I think it's up and coming. They have some guys at tackle ready to take a step forward. So, yeah, I think Chuba Hubbard could have a massive year and will definitely exceed his ADP if healthy.
Mhm. Yeah, I pulled up the numbers here too, and he finished at what'd you say, 14th last year is what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, RB
Yeah.
15. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
over.
So receiving wise, he had 54 targets and caught 43
Yeah,
passes. And he's still 43 passes amounted for under 200 yards for him. So, imagine he does a little better when it's, those yards per target. And then he only had one receiving touchdown and he still finished as running back 14, 15 around there. And
high end RB2. Yeah,
he finished as with only 15 game he only played 15 games, right? He
yep.
didn't he didn't finish the year. So I'm seeing here like all these stats. It's like there's a lot of potential there. And
Hmm.
you give him the ball, you give him the work. I think he's gonna do well. I think that offense is improving. I think that O-line is gonna improve. And I think Bryce Young, now that he's under center and finding himself, and as you said, he's a potential three down back, right? I think Rico will get mixed in a little bit,
Yeah.
but I kind of see him being a change of pace guy too. Like they didn't pay him a lot, it was just because Dallas didn't really want him back. So
Yep.
I agree with you here. I think this is a great take. I think he's going to finish higher than RB19 too. I was even looking at him to choose for my value, but I went a different direction. But yeah, I like Chuba as well.
And I also want to further emphasize the extension and the point at when they did it. I mean, at the point of the extension, Jonathan Brooks was getting healthy. This guy they
Yeah.
invested a second round pick in, he hadn't been out for the year at this point. So, and I think they maybe saw 8 games of a really pretty elite Chuba Hubbard. So they kind of saw right away, like, hey, we need to keep this guy around and have him be a part of our offense. And now Jonathan Brooks is out. So I mean, the
Yeah.
sky's kind of the limit for him in terms of how, like, obviously how this team believes in him. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. I agree. I'm excited for him too. I'll go ahead and get started here with my running back. My value pick, I went with Tony Pollard. He's currently going as the RB25 off the board. ADP is pick 81, which is late seventh round picks, the 709. So, he's not going early rounds. He's not going the fifth round, where you might want to get him. He's going late seventh. That's kind of it's a value, and I'll explain why. So he finished as the RB21 last year, and we're now saying, okay, he's going to finish 4 spots lower than that. And he finished as the RB21 last year on a bad offense, right? Will Levis was the quarterback. That offense couldn't get anything going. And I also think Tony Pollard's a pretty good running back. Like he's not as bad as we kind of just think he is. It's like, oh, the name, like, oh, he was always behind Zeke. He was never anything. Like, no, I think this guy's pretty good. And I definitely think he's better than Tajay Spears. So, even though they say they want to split it, I think Pollard's just going to end up performing to the point where he's getting the work. And, where he's being drafted, I think it's well worth it. Also, that offense is getting a lot better. That offense now goes from Will Levis to Cam Ward. I think that's a major improvement. Then they also paid a lot of money to Dan Moore to play left tackle for them. I know a lot of people say it's a horrible contract. It's not a great contract. They overpaid, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. They paid. They like him. They wanted him to play left tackle. Great. All right. Improvement to the offensive line. They have a couple young guys on there as well. Then for some receiving weapons, they also went ahead and got Van Jefferson and Tyler Lockett here. So they have a couple new guys as well who are competent pass catchers. Even if Lockett's getting older, he's still a solid receiver and he doesn't like to get tackled, which means he's probably going to stay healthy. He always falls down. If you've never seen Tyler Lockett always fall down after he catches it, definitely go look
Yeah.
at some of his highlights. Um, but yeah, then just looking into Pollard a little more, his best season was 2022, so 2 years ago, or sorry, 3 years ago in Dallas when he finished as the running back 8 overall, which is solid again, way above where he's being drafted now. He had a little over 1,000 rushing yards and he had 9 touchdowns. He had 5 last year, so he had 4 more rushing touchdowns that year. And he also had 3 receiving touchdowns in 2022 compared to 0 last year. So he had a total of 7 more touchdowns in 2022 compared to last year. He actually ran for more yards in Tennessee last year than he ever did in Dallas. So
Wow.
it wasn't by a lot. He never has touched the 1,100 rushing yard mark, but he's been above 1,000 yards for the last 3 seasons, and last year was his highest rushing yard season. And receiving wise, it fell off a little bit. He had about 150 more receiving yards in 2022 in Dallas. So, that's a lot of points right there that factors in. Um, but I think, 7 touchdowns less, he finishes the RB8 or 7 touchdowns more, sorry, he finishes the RB8. And then last year, a little bit less receiving work. and less touchdowns. And he's finishing as the RB21, but people are so quick to write him off. Oh, Tajay Spears there. He still had the rushing yards. He's still rushing. He's still, producing on the ground. And I think with an improved offense here, I think there's going to be more touchdown opportunities for him. I don't know if it'll jump back up those seven total touchdowns. I don't think it will, to be honest with you. But I
Yep.
think some room for improvement here. And let's see here. He only had one more touchdown in 2022 compared to 2023. He had more receiving yards and receptions too in 2023, even though there were no touchdowns there. But he finished as the RB14, and he only had one more touchdown compared to this past year. He had one more rushing touchdown compared to this past year and finishes the RB14. So yeah, okay, maybe he's getting more work in the receiving yards and everything, but 2022, I'm talking about an RB8 finish where he's scoring a lot of touchdowns and he's getting some receiving work. Then 2023, I'm talking about him, those touchdowns are dropping. The receiving work's still there, but the touchdowns dropped. And then they drop only one less and he falls off a few extra spots. So I just don't see a path where he's going to fall below that RB25. I know I'm throwing out a lot of numbers and words out here right now, but I just think there's an opportunity here to boil it down. If you listen to one thing here, I think the opportunity for Pollard this year is going to be to score more touchdowns and to improve his receiving game again, which could amount to another RB8 finish. I don't think he will. I don't think he will. But I think RB14 is well in the range of outcomes for him, and he's being drafted 11 spots lower and in the back end of the seventh round. So there's my reasoning as to why I think Tony Pollard is a value here in drafts right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting one because like right off of, name value, you hear Tony Pollard, you're like, why is he a value? Well, I mean, if you think about it, a name I just talked about, Chuba Hubbard, he was going around that eighth, ninth round in drafts last year because he was in that committee of like people like Jonathan Brooks are coming back. Chuba Hubbard's not gonna have a job. Well, Chuba Hubbard won it and he took
Yeah.
it and he ran with it. In this case, like you mentioned, Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard are in that kind of mix where you're either on one side, you're either a Tajay Spears guy or you're a Tony Pollard guy. And it is a little bit split, but I would like to say it favors Tony Pollard because he does get that early down work. And I agree with a lot of you said that. I just don't think Tajay Spears is that good. I think he's been in that conversation for a while now since he got drafted, and he's never really produced to the level that people thought. And that's even as a receiving back. I mean, he really hasn't proven that he's very good at that part of his game either. So I do like Tony Pollard. I agree with the fact that Cam Ward coming in could make a big difference for him. Like we've shown, it's very clear that when offenses improve, the stats and run game and other facets of it improve in fantasy as well. Like when you get a capable guy that doesn't turn the ball over and you get more opportunities, they can make bigger plays. It just helps your value and your fantasy points and where you rank at the end of the season. So, and on a weekly basis. So, this might seem like a boring one to some people, but it's one that could really help you out in leagues if Tony Pollard ends up doing like what you just mentioned. You think he can do. So, yeah, I like it.
Yeah, definitely value. And he's in that dead zone kind of
Yeah.
section for running backs. But hey, find the guys like Tony Pollard that you can go get, and he is a value who could very well finish above where he's being drafted right now.
Zero RB strategy, maybe? Is that a guy
Zero RB strat. I
that
don't know about all that, but hey, maybe we can talk about that some other time. But
yeah.
let's move on here to the wide receivers. Vinny, what do you got here?
Yeah, so this is a guy that I really love. I have him on a couple dynasty teams, so there might be a little bias, but this guy is Xavier Worthy, Chiefs receiver. It's going into his second year, currently at an ADP of 39, so about third at back end of the third, early fourth round. And then that equates to about the 22nd wide receiver off the board. I kind of look at this tier of rookie wide receivers very in an interesting way of, there's those elites like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Lad McConkey. I know I'm forgetting one, but there was But those are the big three that come up to my mind right off the bat. Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously, but he didn't have as great a year as those three. And those are the guys that like they're not values anymore. If anything, they could be in that bust category. It was like they can't have as good of a season. So that's for another episode. But I kind of look to these to the guys that didn't have that rookie year that everyone dreamt of or thought of, like the guys that I just mentioned had. And Worthy kind of fits that mold perfectly, where he kind of started to heat up to the back end of the season. And to give you some stats of that, him heating up, as I mentioned, week 11 on, he averaged 14 fantasy points per game, which in that time period is good for wide receiver eight production. So a top wide receiver over the back end of the second half of the season. Um, he absolutely dominated in the playoffs, which I value a lot. I know we just talked about in terms of Justin Herbert's fantasy production, but in this case, when you're a rookie and you have Patrick Mahomes at your quarterback, who is an all-time great, you don't just get the trust of that guy in a playoff game, let alone a Super Bowl, with just the snap of a finger. You have to earn that trust and show that you're capable of earning those targets and throws down the field. And Xavier Worthy did that in his rookie year in a team playing for the Super Bowl. I mean, let me pull this up. He had 287 yards and three touchdowns across three playoff games. He had 150 plus and two touchdowns in the Super Bowl. So I think in that, I might be contradicting myself a little bit, but that really excites me that he showed up in the biggest game of the year for the best quarterback in the league, maybe talent wise, not fantasy wise, but talent wise. It's maybe arguable at this point, but in my mind, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. And so when you have that guy as your quarterback and you have his trust, that can be endless possibilities in terms of fantasy of how much that guy's willing to get you the ball. Now, the main thing that kind of I think is hurting his ADP, or not hurting, but just the reason he's at the spot he is right now is Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice out for almost the entire year last year. I think he started the year and then had an injury early on. He was playing very well to start the year. He's a very talented receiver. He kind of had the same track that Xavier Worthy had last year, where he started to pick it up in the season, played really well in the playoffs. Then this injury came about. And so that allowed Xavier Worthy to kind of pick up those targets. So Rashee Rice is back. There's a looming suspension that I feel like has been going on for 2 years now. And I was looking into, in all likelihood, is that he's going to play. It's not going to really affect him this year. So who knows? He is coming off a major injury, but he's going to be on the field for week one um, if all things go right for him. That's a big target to just come into an offense and kind of in some people's mind, might ruin Worthy's value. In my mind, I view them as very different receivers. Rashee Rice is a very doesn't really like to go down the field. That's not really his game. He stays across the field. He's kind of a check down, guy that Mahomes could hit early in his first looks across to his targets. Worthy's a deep shot. We know what he brings. He has speed. He kind of gets the ball in the backfield, can run, do really anything. Not as polished of a route runner, but he can do really anything. So I don't really think it affects that Xavier Worthy as much as people might think of Rashee Rice coming back. Also, I look to Travis Kelce slowly starting to diminish his value to the offense and his overall involvement in the offense. Those targets start to go to people. And in my mind, logically, they go to people that Mahomes trusts. And right now, I think on his trust level, I would like to say that Worthy might be ahead of Rashee Rice. I mean, he just threw 150 and two touchdowns to this guy in the Super Bowl, and he hasn't played with Rashee Rice in over a year. So in my mind, Worthy kind of the possibilities are endless if he's as involved as I think he will be and still has the trust of Mahomes that he just had a few months ago. Um, I want to throw in this last little comparison. Not that I think he's Tyreek Hill, but we've seen speed work in this offense and how Andy Reid knows how to utilize that speed. And this is the fastest NFL player of all time we're talking about here in Xavier Worthy, in terms of his 40-yard dash time. So, hey, I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill, but You never know. I mean, this guy could really blow up, and I think at his current ADP of outside the top 20 wide receivers, he has top 10 potential if all things go right. And Mahomes kind of kicks back into that just bombing the ball down the field using that speed to everyone's advantage. So, yeah, again, I know that was a lot, but I really love Worthy.
Yeah, I like to take. Honestly, I'm a little hesitant on Worthy where he's going because he is going in the early fourth. I will preface wide receivers are flying off the board.
Yep,
Like
yep.
he's wide receiver 22 and he's going early fourth. That's a lot of wide receivers in that
I
span.
thought the same thing. It is
So
crazy.
so yeah, we're talking about, a value here, and he is going in the early fourth. Just because wide receivers are going so early right now. I guess my thing, I'm worried. I know Mahomes already has a rapport with Rashee Rice,
Hmm.
and that worries me a little bit. Juju's coming back. They have Hollywood Brown, who is now healthy, and he'll be back. He'll probably get hurt, but he's healthy right now, and he'll be
Yep,
back. Kelsey is still there. I just think there's a lot of mouths to feed. So to spend an early fourth on him does scare me a little bit.
yep,
But at the same time, when you say Worthy's more of that Tyreek Hill type guy, he is. Rashee Rice, when he was very productive, I think he played 3 games last season before getting hurt in week 4. And in those 3 games, he was very productive, but it was a lot of yards after the catch. A lot of that
mhm,
short yardage he was getting for the target. So, if we can get a Mahomes airing it out, I think that's going to be huge for both Worthy and Mahomes. And I
yep.
think Worthy could be a huge value. It's just, are you willing to buy it? Are you willing to buy that Worthy could be the number one guy? And I know you are here, but
Yeah.
you got to make that decision yourself. Is Rashee Rice, is it going to be a lot of short area targets to him and to Travis Kelce? Or are they going to start throwing deep again and utilize Worthy like they did throughout the playoffs? And, he'll be a stud for where he's going in that case.
Yeah, no, you do bring up a fair point of, there are a lot of mouths to feed, and Mahomes is not a guy that like he's not a rookie. He throws the ball around the field. He's not afraid to throw it to a guy that's open. If you're open, he doesn't care who you are. He's gonna throw it to you. And so, but I did want this was one more stat that I did want to throw in to kind of beat those boom bust allegations for Xavier Worthy. I think obviously with the speed, that's initial reaction of like, oh, okay, this guy's gonna have an 80-yard touchdown and 2 receptions for the 80 yards and 1 touchdown. Well, in the span that I was referencing of when he really started getting involved in the offense and that snap count started to spike up over that week 10 to 17, because I don't think he played week 18,
Mhm.
he had 5 games of 4+ receptions and 40 yards. So, I mean, in a PPR league, that's 4+ and 40+. So it's not exactly on the dot, but he's scoring you a good PPR game. And that kind of defeats those boom bust allegations where he uses speed, but he can also catch the ball in short yards, like you mentioned, and get those yak that you're looking for. So I think it's a guy that I'm really high on because of that fact that he's not just speed. It's a lot of other parts of his game that the Chiefs found how to break out. So yeah, but I see your points of Rashee Rice. You got to pick the right one, and we'll see what happens.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that floor you just brought up too there. My,
Yep.
get me to buy in a little bit. My receiver here. So we just talked about Vinny's receiver, Xavier Worthy being the wide receiver 22 and going in the early fourth. Mine is the wide receiver 35 going in the early six. And before I mention his name, again, he is going currently as the wide receiver 35. He finished as the wide receiver 24 in 15 games last year, and he's going 11 spots lower. You're like, oh, who's this guy? Something happened. Something must have happened. Why is he going so low? Well, I think it's just a name thing. It's my guy here is Juwan Jennings, and Juwan Jennings is going very, very low right now. He's going as the wide receiver 35, as I said. So here's my argument for Juwan Jennings. First of all, I think he is the number one receiver on that team. I think he is going to get a lot of targets, a lot is going to go his way. So his snap share and his targets per game slowly increased over the course of the season. And with that, his average points per game increased as well. And now that Deebo Samuel is gone, Brandon Ayuk is still hurt. Who knows what's going on with Ayuk? We don't know if he'll play to where he was at 2 years ago. He was not good before getting hurt last year. And now Ricky Pearsall is dealing with another injury right now in camp this summer. So, currently the only healthy receiving weapons on this team is Juwan Jennings and George Kittle. And we know what Kittle is. We know Kittle's a great player. But for the receivers, it's just Jennings. And newsflash, if you don't realize what's going on here, that means his target share and his snaps are going to be high again. And that's going to lead to a lot of points. He's also only 27, which I thought Juwan Jennings has been around for years. Nope, he's
Yeah.
27. He's entering his fifth season of play. So he is hitting that age where, he could really turn into something big. Again, the Niners, we talked about it with McCaffrey last week, but they have the single easiest schedule of any team, which could mean more feasting for Juwan Jennings. And then he had 113 targets last year and could potentially get more with the situation now with Debo gone and Ayuk and everything. And he only had 77 receptions last year. So, say he gets around 113 again, I think he's going to push closer to 90 receptions, which is quite a big deal. And they're going to be a better team this year. They're going to be a better team in general. I think Juwan Jennings is going to be a big part of the offense, right? Now that they got the ball rolling, the injuries, this and that, Debo, oh, he's kind of falling out. But no, Jennings, we're going to start going to him, have him be a focal point of this offense. They did, and it started working. It started working for the offense. The offense started becoming electric. And I'm not here saying that Jennings is going to be a stud because I don't think he will, right? Last year was his first year of production. But to have him at wide receiver 35 after finishing at wide receiver 24 last year is it's wild to me. I think it's crazy value here. I think in the early sixth do you go Worthy in the early fourth where it's a little bit of an unknown, or do you wait and 2 rounds later you can get Juwan Jennings as your wide receiver 3 at that point? And he's the current wide receiver 1 on the 49ers. I like where he is and I like the production. Some of the guys around him too have some question marks. Jordan Addison, what's JJ McCarthy gonna look like? I know Chris Godwin's there coming back from injury. I know Chris Olave's right around there. Injury, who's his quarterback? So, just some of these names that are right there, like there's a lot of question marks, a lot of injury concerns, and Juwan Jennings is healthy. He has rapport with Brock Purdy and he's on a good team as the wide receiver 1 there. I think he's in a great spot and he's going to produce for where he's going in drafts.
Yeah, no, I again, like you pointed out with Worthy, but the fact that I mean he's wide receiver 35 and he's still going in the sixth round is crazy of how quick these receivers are going off the board. I mean, it's still a great value, but it's just wild to me that there's so many receivers, but you got to pick early. You can't just wait till the eighth, ninth round to get your wide receiver 2 or 3. You got to start picking these guys off early. One thing I did want to point out is I don't know if you mentioned it, but Ricky Pearsall is still in this offense with the Niners. So I think it is kind of one of those things where Ricky Pearsall did start to heat up at the end of the season there, and he's another mouth to feed. But I do agree with you that Debo leaving, that's another target to fill. Those are targets to fill. Kittle, he did kind of have somewhat of an outlier season last year, not in his terms, but it's one that people didn't expect for, his level of where he is at tight end. He looked like prime George Kittle out there scoring a bunch of touchdowns, but do we see his usage start to decline to get ready for the end of a season and playing longer seasons? But one point that I'd like to, add on to what you said is this is kind of, I mean, at least when I think Niners football teams, I think these like hard hitting defenses and these just rough, like tough teams, their defense isn't like that anymore. They started to lose a lot of guys, and it's really a bottom half of the league defense. Um, you might be saying, like, why does defense matter? Well, that means that they're not going to stop and they're going to have to play catch up. And like you mentioned, their schedule's pretty easy, but their defense is pretty bad now. And so, like, they're going to have to, there might be some shootouts on that schedule. And bad defenses usually equate to good fantasy offenses if the pieces are there. the pieces are there. Brock Purdy is a capable quarterback, obviously. Christian McCaffrey's there. So they're going to be moving the ball on offense. And I do like Jawan Jennings to kind of show out in a contract year, I believe, for him. So yeah, I see him improving in a lot of ways for a fantasy production standpoint. And yeah, the fact that he went down 11 points from his overall finish last year, I think it's a good pick for a value.
Mhm. Yeah, I like Pearsall too. As you mentioned, Pearsall is there, started heating up, but he's dealing with an injury right now. He's
Is
only
he?
going,
Yeah.
he's going maybe 3, 4 spots lower than Jennings. So,
Mm,
who am I going to take? The unhealthy guy or the guy who's healthy and finished very high last year?
yeah.
I'm going to go Jennings. 24 is a wide receiver too. So, back end
Yeah.
wide receiver too, but that's a wide receiver too, and you can get him pretty late for where receivers are going right now. So, yeah, I again, if Pearsall comes out healthy, everything's good. Pearsall might be a value too, but right now
Mhm.
Jennings is a huge value, and I love it. Why don't you get us started on the tight ends as we're running a little light on time here?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just go right into the name. My tight end value is Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers. Um, ADP of 131, and that equates to about the 13th tight end off the board. Um, Finished as the tight end nine last year with over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. In terms of tight end production, that's pretty good. The tight end position is kind of a wash usually in fantasy after those top five. Even this year, you could just say the top three guys. It's kind of like a free for all of who finishes in the top 10, and you can't, it's hard to predict. But um, the conversation, myself being a Packers fan, the conversation around the Packers offense as a whole has been who's the wide receiver one? Who's the wide receiver one? Is it Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, Romeo Dobbs? Who is it? I think there's a conversation to be had that Tucker Kraft is their wide receiver one at the tight end position. You 700 yards as a tight end in that whole conversation, it stands out to me. And also the fact that Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, I'll throw Christian Watson in there, but he's most likely out for this entire year after being hurt in the playoffs last year. Um, they've kind of had this like title of like one of them deserves to be the wide receiver one. None of them have stepped up aside from Jaden Reed in his rookie year, but he had a huge downfall in his second year. None of them have really stepped up to the plate to do that. And I think Kraft is kind of being underlooked as the number one option on the offense for that team, as who knows what Matthew Golden's going to do. And so when I think about all of that, and I see that he's a tight end that's potentially going undrafted, I mean that I'm not saying that legitimately, but tight end 13 in a lot of leagues, I don't know about you, but tight end people usually settle with one tight end for their team, and they'll pick guys off the waiver wire for a weekly start if they don't have one of those top three guys. Tucker Kraft's going 13 in a 12-team league. Everyone has a tight end at this point, honestly, if going off the ADP. And the fact that you could get the tight end nine as like the last tight end taken in a draft, not in a draft total, but as a starting tight end, just baffles me that he would fall this low. And I think with the upside, I think he's just an insane value right now. I don't see how this ADP stands once we get to the start of the season. I definitely see him creeping into that top 10. I absolutely see him finishing above us, some of these rookies like Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren, just solely off of opportunity and proven track record of last year. He had a good year. So I love Tucker Kraft this year as a value and just as an overall fantasy asset.
Yeah, I like that you point out that he could be the number one receiver there, right? That's really interesting. Because, I read 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, and I think that touchdown total drops, right? I
Mm,
think Jordan Love's the kind of QB to throw it and air it out. And, they have the receivers to do that. And so, I kind of question if Kraft is going to be that guy and he only finished at tight end nine doing that. So if the touchdowns
mhm.
drop and there's still a lot of mouths to feed, if he is the number one guy, oh yeah, he's going to beat this ADP. But I don't, you said he's also might climb into that top 10. I don't know if he will. I just don't think he's a sexy name that people want to draft.
Mhm.
people are gonna want to draft Warren Loveland over him just because he's not a fun name to draft. But I think,
That's fair.
you're mentioning here, if he is that number one guy there for Jordan Love, and he's not airing it out and he's playing a little bit smarter as a quarterback and reading to the tight end and everything, he is gonna smash that. And I think he's gonna finish probably top 10 again. But we have to see the touchdowns still stay there too, which I think that's the trickiest part. But yeah, I think you have some interesting points here for sure. And just to backtrack, you said you think he's going to finish above Loveland. I absolutely agree with that because as I talked about in the bold predictions, I don't think any tight end is going to finish top 10 rookie tight end. So
Yeah,
I'm completely out on Loveland too. So yeah, I like Kraft for where he's going right there.
yeah, yeah.
Here, so to finish off, I'll get into my tight end here. So, Vinny's tight end is going, Tucker Kraft is going kind of like the back of the 11th round. The tight end I chose is going early 10th round at 111 overall as the tight end nine. So a couple spots higher. He's going at the 1003. Tight end nine here, Evan Engram. And I hear the name Evan Engram. I'm like, I was shocked to see where he's going right now. And he's going behind some guys I would absolutely take him over because, Evan Engram is the only receiving weapon in Denver outside of Cortland Sutton, right? It's Marvin Mims, who was Troy Franklin. That was his Bo Nix's
Yep,
buddy in Oregon, right?
yep, yep.
I don't think these are good receivers. I think Sutton's a good receiver. I think Sutton will still be a focal point of the offense as he was last year for Bo Nix. But there is nobody else. I don't like the other receiving options, but I do really like Engram. And I think he will command targets in this offense. And we've seen what he can do with a bunch of targets. I also know that Sean Payton has said he wants a joker in this offense, right? Whether it's like a running back or something. Oh, Taysom Hill's going to go there. No, they went and they got Evan Engram. They were rumored to draft a tight end. They were rumored to go get a tight end. They're in heavy pursuit for one. They got Engram. They want Engram to be their guy. And I think he is very capable. Health is his biggest concern. But after leaving the Giants, he had two fully healthy seasons in Jacksonville. So last year he wasn't, but two fully healthy seasons the 2 years prior, he finished as a tight end five and tight end two in PPR. So that's pretty damn good. And in his tight end five finish, he had 98 targets and 73 receptions, which I think sounds pretty reasonable for him to be able to do here in Denver because it's such an empty offense. He had his tight end 2 year, he had 143 targets and 113 receptions. Like he broke the record, right? It's like
Mm,
he will not do that again. But if we're talking 98 targets and 73 receptions and he can finish as a tight end five, I think that's very doable. And both years he only had four touchdowns, which I think, with this offense here in Denver, a better offense than what Jacksonville was when he was there. I think he could finish with more touchdowns. Maybe it's only six, but that's still two more touchdowns than he's had. And I think just the upside alone is here. And we're talking about this guy, if he's healthy, he's gonna produce. And just a couple guys who are going right above him, like as a 10th round pick, I think he's worth it when Mark Andrews is going a few picks higher. Mark Andrews is getting older and he only finished well because he had so many touchdowns. He finished with double-digit touchdowns last year. And there's
mm,
Isaiah Likely there. Kelsey's going almost 2 rounds earlier. Well, Kelsey has been in the rumors to being retired, and he wasn't very productive last year. Jonnu Smith is going over a round earlier, and he's in trade talks right now. And what's going to happen with Tua? Then the person people love for PPR is TJ Hawkinson, who's going almost 3 rounds earlier than Engram. And as I just said, with Engram going to get targets, do you want Hawkinson? Who, yeah, maybe he'll get the targets and receptions, like because he is that kind of tight end, but it's JJ McCarthy. Or do you want 3 rounds later, you get Ingram, who will have production because there's no one else there, and it's Bo Nix, who we've already
yep.
seen. Yeah, McCarthy, I think he's going to be a good quarterback. I think he's going to do well in the NFL. But This is his first year. He's a little bit of an unknown, whereas Bo Nix, we saw him produce last year with very minimal options. So I think he's going to produce. I think where he's going in drafts is extremely low, and I'm really excited. If Ingram's there, he will be absolutely somebody I'm targeting in drafts, especially if I decide to skip out on one of the top three guys.
Yeah, no, I love this one the more you talked about it. It is kind of crazy because, Ingram's like a feel-good story of this bust, in New York, he failed, couldn't handle it, all these things. And I mean, I kind of hope this is what happens to Kyle Pitts. He goes to a
Yeah.
different team and tears it up. But Ingram has really showed, um, why he was drafted so highly at the tight end position in New York. I mean, it's crazy. He really revived his career in Jacksonville. And then he just goes to a different team, and it's kind of like people forgot what he just did in Jacksonville. And so this was only a couple of years ago, I mean, that he had this tight end two finish. So I really like it. I think it's some great points, and it's an offense where Sean Payton knows how to use a tight end. I just immediately think Jimmy Graham, who
Mhm.
obviously Evan Ingram is a little past, that athleticism part of his career, but still he's a very capable receiver. I think he'll be a great safety net for Bo Nix. And also, not like you mentioned, there's not a lot of names there. I mean, people might be saying Cortland Sutton, but I think we see a regression from Cortland Sutton. He's never really been that wide receiver one elite guy that a quarterback can rely on. And I don't think he really shows out to continue to be able to do what he did last year. And so I think Evan Ingram really takes over as a big role in this offense and in the red zone. I mean, who knows what he could be capable of, and especially at the what is he, tight end nine? You said
Yeah, tight end nine, right?
tight end nine. I mean, there's not much risk. This is a guy that's going towards the end of your drafts that could be a flyer with so much upside. So yeah, definitely would rather have him over those guys you mentioned a few rounds earlier. And I think it's similar to the quarterback position where if I'm not getting one of those top three guys of even top two of Bowers and McBride, I'm kind of out on the tight end position. And then I'll just go grab Tucker Kraft or Evan Ingram or some of these guys that we didn't even
Yeah.
mention at the back end of the top 10 of tight ends. So, yeah, I think that's going to be my plan for this tight end position if the ADP stays where it's at.
Yeah, I mean, I'm typically a guy, I don't like waiting on tight ends because a lot of the times they don't produce. So, in the past few years in some of my leagues, I've been going earlier on tight ends. I whiffed on Kincaid in a league last year. I thought he was one of those top five guys I was looking at. This year, we're saying top three, top two even. Um,
Yeah.
but, then in my other league, I've had Laporta as a keeper. So, Laporta, I'm like, oh, I need that elite tight end, and it works. It's weird though, because I think Ingram, when I stat him out in my rankings, I'm going to be really interested. I'm going to be really interested to see where Ingram falls in my rankings because I
Yeah.
don't think he's going to be as low as tight end nine at all. And
Yeah.
in most situations, I'd say, oh yeah, he's a value, but still lean towards the top guys. I don't know. I think Ingram could really produce for where he's going, and it'll be really interesting to see how drafts start panning out. Because if he starts going too high, all right, I'm going elite route, but. He's going to be a guy I'll target in the eighth or ninth round just to make sure I get him, but it's still with that value there.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good point about the tight end position as a whole. Like you mentioned, you kind of chased Dundell and Kincaid to finish as one of those elite guys.
Mhm.
And the tight end position in fantasy has shown us year after year that you could chase it all you want, but there's going to be one really good guy, a second guy that's a little behind that guy, then a third guy that's in a tier of his own behind those two guys. Then after that, it's like 50-point differences at the end of the season. So I think people make the mistake too much of chasing to be the next Brock Bowers or Sam Laporta, when in all reality, it just never happens that there's five guys that put up nasty numbers. So why waste a pick? I get it. Like last year, I hit on a bunch of Trey McBride shares because that was a path to targets and receptions, but as a whole, these guys at the end, bottom half or the end of the top 10 of top or tight end rankings in ADP are kind of the steals and gems that people kind of look past. So, yeah, I think it's a good point to talk about your misses in the past as kind of an example.
Yeah, and just again, opportunity is what's huge, right? The
Yeah.
top five guys last year four of them did not finish where they were being drafted, right?
Hmm.
McBride was the only one of the top five to finish where he was. Just to recap, Kelsey was number one, Laporta was number two, or vice versa. Neither one of them finished at one and two.
Yep,
Then
yep.
you had Trey McBride and Mark Andrews, three and four-ish, and McBride finished higher.
Mm.
Mark Andrews didn't. He wasn't too far off, but he didn't, and it was only because of touchdowns. And then Kincaid had fell off a cliff. Who knows what the hell happened? But
Yep,
Powers was that guy who there was a path to opportunity, and he produced because he's just a great tight end in general. Like he can
yep.
really catch the ball.
He's a
So
unicorn. He's a guy that he's going to be Kelsey these next 10 years.
yeah.
So, yeah,
And I think it's kind of the same situation, right? Like, who are the later guys who have the opportunity that could, you know, get right back up there? Kittle, it was the same thing. Oh, Kittle is around six or seven, and, you know, he was a value last year. So I think
yep.
Ingram is a great option. And Kraft, if you believe in him potentially being the number one receiver there in Green Bay, I think that's
Hey,
great.
we'll see.
Tight ends are going to be fun to talk about because it's always so polarizing. You never know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a year where there's two good ones and the rest are kind of trash. So
Yep, yep.
we'll see. I think that rankings episode later on and probably in July.
Excited to get going on
Yeah,
those. Yeah.
that'll be a lot of fun. We'll get to those later on. We're gonna
Yep.
cap it off there for today. You'll have busts next week, so same criteria as this week. Top 20 QB, top 36 running back and receiver, and top 15 tight end. And we're gonna choose somebody who we think is gonna finish lower than where they're being drafted, consider them a bust. And you'll have that episode coming for you next week, followed by sleepers the week after. But that'll do it for today's episode. So we appreciate you all for tuning in as always, and we're looking forward to continuing talking about these players here, the values, busts, and sleepers. It'll be a lot of fun doing these 3 weeks. So thanks for
All
tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next week.
right. Peace.